Hey there, everyone. I'm Ashlea Bullington, and you're watching the fifth quarter, our Friday night wrap-up show where we bring you all the things happening around the Metroplex on the high school sports scene. And up first, we have Ryan Harris on to talk to us about the district races. Ryan, it's another big week of high school basketball. We're getting into these teams playing each other for the second time around. We've had some pretty big matchups and some big surprises here in DFW, one being that Lewisville team. Can you expand more on the team that you've watched the last week almost?
Yeah, they got off to a really hot start in district. They started 4-0. That's over there in District 6, 6A. And they beat Coppell, who is, as up to this point, the best team in that district, and they're in first place right now. They're 6-1, and their only losses to Lewisville. But they're on a 3-game losing streak, and because that district is so competitive right now, that puts them out of the playoffs. They're in fifth place. It's really over there. It's five really good teams, and then three teams that aren't as good as those five. It's sort of broken up into 5 and 3. So as we get into the back half of this district schedule, you figure there'll be Hebron, Nimitz, Irving. If they can take care of business, there's 3 more wins. But they're going to have a better record the rest of the way than probably Marcus or MacArthur or Flower Mound, because all of those teams are tied for second right now at 6-2, whereas Lewisville is 4-3, and then Coppell, like I said, in first place at 6-1. So they have Keontae George. The question is, can he carry them down the stretch and pick up some wins against those top 4 teams, because that's their path to the playoffs right now. And if you're Flower Mound or MacArthur or Marcus, you've got to make sure that, again, you take care of business against the bottom 3 teams, but that, when it comes time to play the Coppells and when you're facing, those other 4 teams, you've got to make sure that you come out with a winning record in the back half of the district schedule. Otherwise, you may be sitting at home for the playoffs. So I'm really interested to see how those 5 shake out over the
Most
next few
definitely,
weeks.
and there was a big matchup when South Grand Prairie took on Waxahachie. What a game that was.
Yeah, it was a great game. It was tied. It was somewhere in the 60s, I believe, at the end of regulation, and uh, South Grand Prairie was able to outscore Waxahachie. It did go through 4 overtimes, but South Grand Prairie outscored Waxahachie 37-33 throughout those 4 overtime periods. Christian Turner led them with 38 points. They had, obviously the final score was 101-97, so a lot of points were scored. But he led them, and it was CJ Nolan with a game high 41 for Waxahachie. But it's really nice when you're South Grand Prairie and you can get 38 out of Christian Turner and another 25 out of Caden Bennett. So, it was a wild game. And like I said, that I've talked about it in past weeks, that district is really, really competitive. Right now, South Grand Prairie second in the standings, Waxahachie third, and a game separates those two. That game was, played last Friday. South Grand Prairie came out on top. They're 6-2. Waxahachie's 5-3. And then Grand Prairie leads the district at 8-0. They've got a 2-game lead on South Grand Prairie, so they can even afford to lose one on the back half of the schedule if they need to. If South Grand Prairie wants to move up to the first slot, they're probably going to have to win out. They still have a game left against Grand Prairie, but they need, at this point, everyone below Grand Prairie needs to win out, and they need help. So I will give a shout out to DeSoto. They are on a 3-game winning streak in that district. They're up to 4-3. They're in 4th place, so they are in the playoffs. Mansfield and Cedar Hill have slipped a little bit. It's starting to become more of a clear picture, as is the case in most districts, with Grand Prairie, South Grand Prairie, Waxahachie, and DeSoto being the 4 in right now. Mansfield is a game behind. Cedar Hill a game and a half behind. So again, that's going to be another district where it is really interesting to see how things turn out, but it is going to be a lot of close competitive games against those top 4 or 5 teams. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that
That's
one
going to be
shakes
a
out as well.
really, really good district. I mean, there's so many good districts around the DFW Metroplex. One of the coolest things to watch is that it's not always the team that we're used to seeing being the best in the district. That's that's on top right now. That's one of the cool things. We were talking about Grand Prairie. Lewisville's kind of on the back end of a slide right now. But another team is Keller, seems to be pretty hot in their district right now.
Yeah, they've won 5 in a row. They had the shaky start, 0-3. Part of that was their schedule. The best 2 teams in District 5, 6A are Dayton Guyer and Byron Nelson, and those were 2 of their first 3 games. The really tough thing when they started the district play, they went on the road to Eaton and lost. And so they started 0-3, but they've taken care of business against the rest of the district. They finished out that first half of district play, beating Central, beating Timber Creek, beating Fossil Ridge, beating South Lake Carroll, and then they picked up a win over Eaton in the first game of the back half of their schedule at home on Tuesday night. They won, I think it was 49-22. A whole team with 22 points is pretty impressive. I know it happens occasionally, especially when you get a team like Grand Prairie playing a team at the bottom of their district or something like that. But, South Lake Carroll's put up the sort of a number a few times this season, but again, impressive nonetheless. So they're on a 5-game winning streak, and they have a big showdown with Dayton Guyer tonight at home. They held in there with Guyer on the road the first time around. They were down like 2-3 points late, had to foul, ended up losing by 5 or 6 on the road. So they've got a big showdown tonight, but that might be a loss coming for them tonight. It looks like right now the 4 playoff teams in that district, it's Guyer, Byron Nelson, Keller, and Keller Central. Again, Central a game ahead of Eaton. Eaton really needed that win over Keller the other night, and they came out and lost by more than 20. So we'll see if they can scratch and claw their way back into the playoff picture. But they're going to need to beat Central. They're going to need to beat all the teams that they're supposed to beat. But this district really is just Guyer and Byron Nelson. And of course, Nelson's 7-1. Their one loss in the first half of district was to Guyer. So keep an eye on those 2 teams in the playoffs, because don't sleep on Byron. They've got some shooters and they got a lot of length, and they can really switch on defense 1 through 5.
Definitely. So. I got one more question for you, Ryan. These teams, a lot of them in DFW are state ranked. Which of the state ranked teams do you see making it all the way to San Antonio now that we're getting into the second half of district?
Well, that's a loaded question, because someone's going to make it. Of course, Duncanville is probably the outstanding favorite, but their only district test is Richardson. Richardson's really good, and they're another team that could do it. But they had a 2-point win over Richardson at home. We still have the second matchup between those 2 teams later on in the season. But I mean, you see it all the time where a team will go out and beat another good team that's in their district twice and then lose to that same team in the playoffs. It's happened before. It could happen with Duncanville. So I would keep my eye on them and Richardson. I'd also keep my eye on Grand Prairie. And then I'll also throw in Guyer. Guyer's a good. They're just. I mean, they have the tradition, but they've also got a big man in Jacoby Coles that could potentially carry that team throughout the playoffs. So I think those are 4 good bets in 6A. And 5A, I'll give a quick shout out to Newman Smith, because like I mentioned last week, again, undefeated in district. They're a week later, they're still undefeated in district, and one of the state's top ranked teams. So look out for them as well.
Ryan, thank you again for coming on the 5th quarter with us. Love the breakdown of district races. Up next, we talk to head coach David Peavy about his Duncanville Panthers.
Don't forget to catch our extended coverage of the high school football season each week on The Warm-Up, presented by your local North Texas Geico agents. We will get you ready for all the action this Thursday on all our social media outlets. Watch Inside High School Sports to catch this week's MVP, brought to you by GiveMeTheVin.com. These MVP athletes make it look easy, just like GiveMeTheVin.com makes it easy to sell your car.
The Duncanville Panthers are looking to have back-to-back state championships. And this season, they're ranked the #1 team in Texas as they're about to go into the second half of district play. But we caught up with head coach David Peavy to talk about his team.
coming to the end of the first half of your district play. You guys have been the hunted all season. How has the season been as far as being the hunted and being able to take that target off your back?
Really tough. You know, we had a crazy schedule. You know, we played some really good opponents, played all over the country, and like you said, we've got the big X on our back, and everybody wants us. And you know, we gotta match everybody's intensity and focus. But this is a good game for us. You know, it's a playoff atmosphere.
Talk about how Micah has developed into the stud of the team with Jemiah's leaving. I know Micah got that MVP last year at state, but he's now the guy that everybody is doubling up.
You know, Micah has really worked hard. You know, he's worked hard. He comes in early every morning, stays after practice. You know, he's definitely our leader in practice and gives us energy, plays hard all the time. So that's made him our leader, and everybody on the team respects him. They know what they're going to get from him. You know, no matter if he's missing shots or whatever, he's going to play hard and compete at all times. So, you know, he's carrying us a little bit right now as far as that goes.
And he's made the big shots, too. I've been to 2 of your games personally, and he's made buzzer beaters in both of them, the Whataburger and this one here.
Right.
He craves that shot, doesn't he, that last shot?
He's not afraid of the moment. You know, he's played on some big stages his whole life. You know, played on a big circuit in the summer, and, you know, he's been a varsity starter for 4 years now, and has had so many opportunities to make big plays. So seeing him right now, it's not a big deal to him.
Last question. Region 1 is going to be crazy this year because there's a lot of new teams kind of stepping up in the air with the Grand Prairies, the LD Bells, and what have you. How much are you looking forward to? And there's a good chance you're going to make the playoffs. How much are you looking forward to that region and going through the ballot?
I'm not. No, our region is bananas. I mean, it's really, really tough. You know, bunch of great competitors, really good players, great coaches, and a lot of good fans too. So, I mean, it's going to be fun, but we're going to have to be ready every night.
Thank you for your time, Coach Peavy. Up next, we're going to switch gears a little bit and have the one, the only, Matt Diggs on to talk realignment with us.
The Inside Story is driven by your North Texas Honda dealers. Right now, they can help you get great deals on award-winning Hondas. It's their job to be helpful, so stop by your local helpful Honda dealer today.
And we're back with the fifth quarter. Realignment for districts happens on Monday, February 3rd, and we have the one, the only, Matt Diggsy on with us to talk about what he thinks is going to happen.
Diggsy, we miss you. We've brought you on to talk about realignment, so let's get to it. What do you think is going to happen on Monday as we get into this realignment and these districts with new matchups?
First of all, I love the graphic you have for me. That's awesome. It's like I can see it in my head. You didn't think I was just going to let our first time talking on this great show go without a little bit of banner, right?
I mean, I knew it was going to.
It was going to happen, but I know you're getting all these compressed, shows because basketball season and all that great stuff. So I'll try not to ramble too much. But what are the storylines? I think the storylines are going to be which coaches are going to quit and which coaches are just going to throw a furor. Realignment brings a whole host of storylines year after year. And what we've seen some traditions in UIL realignment and how West Texas impacts DFW. And now I think this year we're going to kind of see how Central Texas impacts DFW. I think that's going to be a storyline to watch. A very fun storyline to watch is I think it is a more probable than not that we're going to see Longview and Highland Park in the same district. And how amazing is that going to be in football and across all the other sports? I think Longview is just going to set up shop over there at Kincaid. They kind of consider that Lobo West and just enjoy the next couple of years in 5A. So I think that when we are looking at realignment, there are all kinds of rumors. All you have to do is go to Twitter and type realignment rumors, and you'll be blown away. The most crazy realignment rumor was that there was a consideration that Midlothian, our good friends just to the south of us here in DFW, might actually be in an El Paso district. How crazy is that? That was a legitimate consideration. I guess you get to see the state on Tuesday nights. Could you imagine? Because you've talked about your sports. What would it do to an athlete to have to basically travel 8 to 9 hours to play soccer on a Tuesday or on a Friday?
You couldn't do that. I mean, think about that. You'd have to go out the night before, because there's no way that you could make an 8-hour trip there and an 8-hour trip back in one day. I'm very sorry about that. That's like, and are you going to take a school bus out there, or are you going to actually charter something?
And you have to decide that for all your sports, because, we talk about football and basketball and some of the other sports, softball, baseball. But then, there's cross country and there's all these other smaller sports, or soccer, and they all have to make that as well. And a lot of times the realignments, they do realign differently for different sports. Football will get different rules than basketball and soccer. And then they'll make some considerations for a sport where you just go once every 2 years versus once every year. But that doesn't change the fact out in West Texas, they're doing that for all the sports. And that's just kind of their normal. And we saw in this last realignment that San Angelo Central, we had to talk about them and Abilene coming into the district. And I think one of my predictions is going to be that we are going to see one of those two teams. I don't know which team they're going to do. I think we're going to see either Abilene or San Angelo Central stay as a DFW Metroplex school. Currently, there are 7 teams out in West Texas. You have Midland Lee, Odessa Permian, and Wolford Friendship as kind of the 5 far West Texas schools. And then you're going to have San Angelo Central or Abilene. I think one of those teams will stick with those 5, make it a 6-team district, and then I think the other team will come out to DFW and be in the West DFW loop. So I think that's going to be a storyline to watch. Now, they could make it a 7-team district out there. I know a lot of people are projecting that, but the problem with the 7-team district is that it makes it very hard for them to find that 4th football game that they have to really scramble. And I think they try to make odd team alignments. If they're going to do that, they try to match them with someone, and they might match them mentally with like a Central Texas district, but I think they're going to move one of those teams out to DFW, and I think it'll probably be Abilene, but that's something we will definitely be watching as well.
I cannot believe, I know you've just covered that, but I can't believe that they're thinking about putting a DFW school with a team like El Paso. To me, that just sounds that's baffling, first off.
Well, it was baffling, but the issue was out there you had 3 teams in El Paso, you had 3 teams in Lubbock, and you just were trying to figure out what are you going to do. So they were thinking about kind of creating this 10-team mega district. But fortunately, an El Paso team opted up from the 5A Division II to 5A Division I. So I think what we're going to see now is just El Paso get a 4-team district, and they'll just be by themselves, basically. And then you'll see Amarillo and Lubbock kind of unite. And I think Midlothian is breathing a sigh of relief. But the fact that is on the table, and that's one of the biggest arguments against doing 6A and split divisions, is eventually you're going to see districts where Odessa Permian and Lewisville are in the same district, and people are just going to be screaming bloody murder about that. But at some point, there are very small districts in 4A and 3A that are doing that kind of travel right now as it is. So it's not, I don't think we're going to see it this time, but there are going to be situations and things maybe we don't cover in the Dallas area where you're going to have coaches screaming about that.
Speaking of coaches screaming, do you have any idea of what some of these coaches are thinking as we're getting closer to Monday, and some of their schedules might be a little bit up in the air?
Yeah, absolutely. Coaches off the record kind of plan their non-district schedules. I saw a tweet go up a couple of days ago that we're going to get the Dodge Bowl to start the season. We're going to have Austin Westlake play South Lake Carroll at AT&T, assuming they're not in the same district, kind of a thing. And those things cannot be finalized until after this this realignment, because you never know when there's going to be a random 9-team district, a random 10-team district happen. For instance, I know, I have to work a Plano East reference in there. I know Plano East has tentatively scheduled to play Wiley in non-district. Well, if Wiley and Plano East get districted in the same district, that game is now off the shelf, and you got to go scramble and find another game. And then there were some really good articles in newspapers this week about how teams like Duncanville and Lancaster have a hard time finding non-district games. And I think that we're going to see, because of realignment chaos and craziness, that's going to be even harder, because Duncanville, we saw them go in kind of an easier district with Richardson and Skyline this past year. But this year we're thinking maybe that the Waco schools are going to come up. And this is how realignment kind of works. It's like puzzle pieces. Out in Central Texas, there are 9 teams. You have Belton, Temple, Waco, Midway, Copperas Cove, and the 4 Killeen schools. But if they move 2 of those schools over to DFW, that makes that a nice 7-team loop. Maybe that's the 7-team loop that matches with the West Texas 7-team loop. And maybe instead of having San Angelo Central and Abilene as part of the Metroplex, maybe we're going to see Waco and Midway as part of the Metroplex. And if you do that, then you have Cedar Hill, and you have Duncanville, and you have DeSoto. And then I know you're probably going to have some very angry production crew up there who's having to go to Waco and Midway now as part of the regular schedule of filming and doing taping for basketball and football. And this impacts media too, because we're trying to figure out what we're going to cover. And we have the debates of what's DFW, what's the Metroplex, and those kinds of things. And every year you're going to see more and more teams, as the Metroplex continues to expand, come into the Metroplex. And we're going to see new teams up in 6A this year. Just offhand, Denton Braswell is going to join your team, Denton Geyer, as Denton ISD representatives in 6A. And then we're going to see Chisholm Trail and Saginaw Boswell. Those were teams that were in 5A Division I. Now they're going to be in 6A, and how that impacts the Metroplex. And our good friends in Richland, we were covering them all year and talking about them all year. Well, they're dropping to 5A Division I, so that just leaves Haltom as the only Birdville ISD 6A team, which makes them a floater. Are they going to go out to the west area districts, or are they going to maybe be plotted with the South Lakes and the Coppells? It's that puzzle piece. Once one piece falls, all the other pieces also fall.
Definitely is like a puzzle. So speaking of teams moving up to 5 or down to 5A and up to 6A, another team that will be doing that is down in Houston, where Shadow Creek's moving up to 6A. But do you think any of those Metroplex teams that are moving down to 5A or up to 6A have a really good chance of going and making a deep run into playoffs next year, possibly?
And districting really will dictate that. I know one thing that people are really screaming about, because it might happen, and we've talked about this kind of in our football coverage, was that Aledo actually had a pretty good district that they got to play decent teams and were challenged a little bit. We talked about the Aledo Midlothian game and how that really pushed Aledo, and how that could have been a really good trigger for them to have success this year. Well, we're thinking this year that Aledo is now going to be put in a Fort Worth ISD district. So it's going to be, the Fort Worth North Sides and Fort Worth Polys. They're going to be playing Aledo in the next realignment in 5A Division II. That's what we're kind of currently projecting as far as that goes. So how is that going to impact Aledo? How is that going to impact their preparation? Maybe now they're going to think to themselves, maybe we should be scheduling Duncanville. Maybe we should be scheduling some of these other teams, because we're not going to get that kind of challenge in district when we're playing Fort Worth Northside, Fort Worth Poly, Fort Worth South Hills, Southwest Trimble Tech, and Fort Worth Wyatt. Now, maybe they put a Grapevine in there. Maybe they do something like that and make it even more. Maybe they pull an Everman into that grouping, but Aledo could be with Fort Worth ISD teams in Division II. And Aledo is very fortunate that they are right on the top of that Division II. It's hard to pick against Aledo because of not necessarily that they moved up or moved down, but a lot of other teams moved up, and really they're kind of the big dog in 5A Division II. Prosper is an interesting team to kind of watch because they broke off into two schools this year, Prosper and Prosper Rock Hill, but Prosper was still big enough to stay in 6A. So will they be able to carry that success forward that they had this past year? I'm not really sure how that works, but I think a team that we're all kind of considering in the Metroplex, Longview dropping to 5A. Longview's not a DFW team, but the fact they're going to be playing DFW teams in district and be playing DFW teams in the playoffs, I think Longview really has to like the fact that they are in 5A Division I and that they're going to be tested against teams like John Tyler and Highland Park in district play. I think that's going to be a good thing for Longview.
Most definitely. So before we close this out, Dig, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, there's so many things I can add.
You get to only pick
I think
one, though.
I know, but I think we're going to see chaos. I think with the districts of the West Texas districts being smaller, there's two routes that they can go. They can either overload the DFW districts, and we see a lot of 9-team districts, and we saw that about 6 years ago, or they can give DFW an extra district, and then we see a lot of 6 and 7-team districts randomly. I think that the UIL this year is going to choose to load up the DFW districts. I think we're going to see a lot of 7, 8, 9-team districts, and I think that's going to create a lot of compact schedules, and I think that's what we're really going to be looking at is, are we going to have smaller districts or bigger districts? Because obviously if you have smaller districts, that gives you a better chance of making the playoffs. More teams making the playoffs gives you a better chance of longer runs, versus if you have to beat 9, if you're in a 10-team district, you have a harder chance of getting out. And I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see less DFW teams in the playoffs because we're going to see more densely packed districts this realignment.
Diggsy, thank you so much for coming on the fifth quarter. I miss you right here with me. I'm just all here by myself right now. It's okay though. Next football season, you and me, breaking it down again. We gave the producer of Wingstop Inside High School Sports, Ward Fasold, the night off so he can prepare a great show for you. And it's going to be a great show. Tune in tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. on NBC5 to watch Wingstop Inside High School Sports. We have a jam-packed show coming up for you. But until then, I'm Ashlea Bullington, and thank you so much for watching the fifth quarter.